Hang on. Hi, Eugene. Can you hear me?
Hey, Catherine, how are you? Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yep. All good. Good morning. Oh, good evening
Good
where you
morning.
are.
Yes, good morning on your side. Good evening here.
Yeah. Okay. It's just doing a quick mic check to see if everything's okay. All sounds
hmm
good. So I think we can get started.
Cool. Sounds good.
Okay, great. Let's go. All right. Let's start this spotlight. All right. Okay. Welcome to KatKast, everyone, the podcast where governance meets growth. I'm Katherine, founder of Katashe Solutions and Secretary General at Access, a blockchain nonprofit in Singapore. So, over the past decade, I've worked across finance, technology, and mission driven ecosystems, helping scale startups across APAC while building for public goods. So, KatKast is where we explore the real mechanics of innovation from DAO governance, staking policy to inclusive finance, on-chain education, and the future of public infrastructure. So if you care about how systems scale and who they serve, you're in the right place. So let's dive in. So I'd like to introduce my guest on today's episode. I'm joined by someone who's deep in the trenches of DAO governance and thinking, building, challenging how we recognize governance contributions as work and design for long-term sustainable protocol growth. So Eugene Leventhal is someone I follow for a long while. I'm really excited to have him here. So Eugene, welcome to KatKast. For those of you who may not know you yet, could you share a little bit more about your background and what you're working on?
Sure. And yeah, thanks so much for having me. Excited to be part of the conversation and yeah, see where we'll take it today. In terms of background, so I guess I'll start with where I'm at and just do a quick background from there. So right now I kind of wear two hats. The main hat is with Scroll Foundation, where I am the head of governance, and so working on all things relating to supporting and nurturing the DAO as we're in the first year of its since its inception, rather. And the second hat that I wear is with MetaGov, which is a governance research nonprofit, where I'm a research director of the Grant Innovation Lab. And yeah, that group specifically focuses on kind of open source research. And we've been researching specifically grants in the Web3 space, though I guess capital allocation a little more broadly. The short version of my background is finance degree, finance and psych double major in undergrad, 7 years in the corporate world, went down the Ethereum rabbit hole during that stretch, decided to go to grad school instead of jumping right into the Web3 world, convinced the university to hire me after I completed my public policy master's and did partnerships, helped set up a blockchain research initiative there and launched a podcast for the university. Then worked at Smart Contract Research Forum for about year and a half, 2 years. And then once that project wrapped up, jumped over to MetaGov and was there full time until I joined Scroll in September.
Okay, awesome. It's a very cool journey that you have, wearing multiple hats, and that's kind of where we're at in the space, right? Where we're both actively pioneering and building at the same time. So before we dive into DAO governance, I just want to do a little personal catch up, Eugene, from the last time we corresponded. So some good news to kick off. I also went on the academic rabbit hole a bit, and I've just been appointed as adjunct research fellow at the Institute of Policy Studies at NUS, the National University of
Nice.
Singapore. Yeah, which I'm really
Congrats.
excited about because, yeah, it's been a long time coming. So for me, it's a meaningful bridge between the work I've done in finance, tech, and nonprofit ecosystems, especially around like inclusive innovation. So on one area I'm really hoping to explore more though through this lens is how nonprofit infrastructure and blockchain can intersect, especially when it comes to
Mm.
community cohesion and volunteerism. So
hmm
at Katashe, we have started the idea of a blockchain-powered community currency, something that could
Mm.
really reward skilled volunteerism and reinforce social capital. Like think a more network programmable version of time banking, but with a Web3 twist. So Eugene, you did mention having advised the time banking project in Pittsburgh before, and
Yes.
can you tell us a little bit more about that? What you've seen work and what not work when it comes to time banking models in Web3 adoption?
Yeah, absolutely. The project that I got involved with was Involvement, which is a project led by Dan Little. And they're the general idea. was, I guess, pretty straightforward. Time banking. So for those who might not be familiar, it's the idea that what if I have some free time? I can volunteer my free time to clean up the neighborhood, to go help a garden created, to do like a skill exchange. And I don't know if I'm good at like fixing porches, I can go fix someone's porch or something. But instead of getting paid for my time, I could get rewarded with something else in the community. So that specific project was working on how they can pretty much onboard local businesses and vendors that would
Mm.
effectively supply the rewards. So I go volunteer at my local library, and in turn, I get points for getting recognition of my time spent there. And those points can be redeemed for a free coffee or a free lunch or a free whatever, depending on how many points I've amassed.
Mm.
It's been a minute, so I might be butchering some of the nuanced details there, but I think
Okay.
generally speaking, that was the gist of the project. And I guess a number of challenges arise with what I just described. Of is uh, a neighborhood might need someone to just like in the neighborhood that I live in, there's folks, once there's a school not far away, there's kind of
Mhm.
community guardians or some, I'm forgetting exactly what their name is here in the DC area, but it's just folks making sure that like kids don't get in trouble, don't get up to shenanigans, that like there's
Mm.
no physical harm or anything coming to kids. So how do you equate that to someone teaching a younger kid how to read, to someone spending time with a senior and helping them bring their groceries back from this? Just how do you actually
Yeah.
create somewhat of an equal comparison, or not comparison, but a equalizing element to labor hours for whatever the reward is, even if it's non-financial?
Mm.
And then people who just might find their time more valuable, or their skill more niche and rarer and harder to find an exchange
Yeah.
for. uh, I guess it's somewhat understandable, where it's like, hey, if I'm the only one in my neighborhood who knows how to do a thing, why is that valued the same as like just standing there, a thing that most of us can do? And so,
Mm.
arguably there's just the like, we're doing good. Let's not get lost in the grumpy details about it, right? The point is
Mm.
just help others and be pro-social actors in our communities and lived environments. But we're
Mm.
people, we're flawed creatures, we have egos and the like. So that's one element. Then it's also like, how do you get the businesses to give free gift cards, right? Like that's pretty much a
Mm.
goodwill element, or you pitch it as a marketing benefit that like, hey, well, you're actually going to drive volunteers to your business. And once they're there, they see that you care, you're willing to do this exchange. Maybe they'll spend more money, right? But until you can
Mm.
have enough data to say of like, this is the rough revenue gain that we've seen in the businesses do this, it's not I could see why it's not a convincing pitch for some businesses. So in that sense,
Mm.
I think it's just like the initial starting point of the network can be really difficult, and how to get those kind of effects.
That's interesting. Yeah, no, I hear you. It's like in order to achieve the network effects in the community to adopt time banking, there's that mutuality of the exchange of value that has to be established first between both sides of the object they exchange. And sometimes that may not be what you call unfair. What you call fair, it may not be fair to the other party, right? Because
Yeah.
everyone comes with different skill sets to the table, and also, yeah. So I hear you. It's a spectrum, and it comes down to incentives really, and what margins can I gain from these incentives, which brings us nicely to the next topic, on delegate incentive programs and decentralized governance. It's something I've been reflecting about lately, actually, especially after reading through the discussions on the Scroll governance forums. It's just how complicated it is to design delegate incentive programs on more time banking, which does have parallels in principle. When I say delegate DIP or DIP, I mean delegate incentive programs. For those of you who are not familiar, um, we don't just want to reward activity, right? In the Web3 space, we want to actually nurture governance as a form of labor with long-term value. So we talk a lot about participation metrics, voting power, forum engagements, but the real question is, how do we start recognizing governance as meaningful labor, right? I went through personally went through the delegate race, when Lido
Mm,
DAO, and still actively contribute, but I retain a very
mm,
small delegation, and I've seen firsthand how hard it is to gain visibility as a new delegate, where discovery is fragmented and there's often no real clear path to interest outside holding amounts of voting power getting picked by whales. But
mm,
honestly, I realized as I continued down the journey, why would a whale even delegate? Because most of them are they practice their own self-activism. So there's little incentive alignment to share power.
Yeah.
So it ends up reinforcing some sort of concentration dynamics we're supposedly
Mhm.
trying to decentralize. So I had this idea, I wanted to explore this idea with you first, Eugene. Like, do you think if to bring more a diverse delegate set into these new ecosystems, like what if on off-chain attestations, like
Mm.
what we do in time banking, like verified contributions, peer endorsements, time bank hours, they could serve as an inclusive onboarding path to governance? Like, do you think that could
Mm.
reduce reliance on token-weighted voting and instead recognizing underrepresented labor or newer participants, just to rebalance the way influence is earned? Supporting contributors who are long on effort but short on tokens. I love your thoughts on this. Yeah,
Yeah. And I actually wanted to make one more point on time banking before directly answering your question.
sure.
I feel
Yeah.
like one reasonable criticism of time banking, especially if you're more of like mutual aid mentality, is that time banking is just a flawed model. And why do we think of it as this, mutual exchange where everyone needs to always walk away with some value, as opposed to
Mm,
just like creating systems that, those who have a little more look out for those who have a little less,
true.
and not do it from a
Mm,
place of charity, but from a place of just understanding that we're one collective. There's days where I feel stronger and I can support others, and there's days where I might need support. And, that gets,
mm,
that's just on like a personal, emotional level. But then you broaden it out to a community, right? Things like luck and so many factors outside of individual control play into it.
mm.
And yeah, I personally, I am very empathetic with that argument. And,
Yeah.
um, but again, like that's just speaking to certain personality traits and other elements about myself individually. And so, I guess shifting
Yeah.
over to what you were mentioning on these kind of bringing off-chain attestations or attesting to kind of general behaviors or contributions in other environments and kind of porting over that reputation to Web3 systems. Um, in theory, it sounds potentially great, right? If designed well
Mm,
and cleanly and I guess verifiable and in a way that it can be trusted. I think
yeah.
something like that could, in theory, work well. I guess there's the challenge of, well, what does an off-chain attestation system really mean? Even with on-chain attestation, right? If I'm attesting to you doing a thing, well, who am I to be
Mm,
trusted in the first place? How do you know I didn't just
mm,
create dozens of bots to go pretend to attest to a thing for me? Right. So then you're either coming
mm,
back to like a lot of core Web3 type discussions, which is, oh, well, we need to trust a middleman, or you kind of just trust the collective and then try to mitigate the issues and try to figure out how is it gameable and try to protect it from that gaming. Um,
mm,
and yeah, I don't know that there's a right or wrong here. I think it's more about just understanding what your community is trying to optimize around and how do you respect the experience and the people that you are trying to be supportive of in your community, right? A lot of DAOs
mm,
are very Web3 native. A lot of them were, right, birthed out of DeFi summer. A lot of them were birthed because not because of the ideological or the potential benefits of DAOs versus traditional orgs, but it was like,
mm.
oh, well, who are you going to sue if the DAO's making decisions, right? And it was a lot more about regulatory avoidance initially. So I think the
Yeah.
audience of DAOs is not necessarily representative of, like your average community participant around the world. Um,
Mm,
so yeah, if you're trying to make a Web3 first thing for degens, maybe you don't need that, real world attestation. Like that's hyper irrelevant.
true.
Whereas if you're going for like actually working with communities that are not digitally native, who don't know what the
Mm,
heck a blockchain is, for whom the idea of like, wait, I send my money and if I make a typo, it disappears, right? Like there's certain things in the Web3 UI that are still prohibitive for most people in the world. So just on the attestation front, I think comparing two
mm,
projects of Impact Garden and Link Trust is maybe a good example here,
mm,
where Impact Garden was all about EAS based attestation, and it was used in one of the optimism rounds, I think 6 or 7, or whichever one happened around September, October last year. Um,
mm,
but it was about like, oh, I know Katherine released a report or hosted a podcast or ran this event at a conference. I'm going
yeah.
to test using EAS and the interface that they developed for the optimism ecosystem
Ah,
to say that, like, yes, you did that thing. And then you can have this kind of web of attestation around all of the activities that you did. And they specifically use this to help inform their retro rounds, right? So that attestation data helped the people actually deciding capital allocation make their capital allocations. But that's really serving a Web3 audience. Link Trust
Right.
is, or was, I actually haven't caught up with them in a while, so I'm not 100% sure where they're at today. But last time I spoke to them around 9 or so months ago, they were very
Mm,
much focused on working with real communities on the ground that are not digitally native, and definitely not, onboarded on chain. So for them, they actually have this infrastructure, this very social infrastructure of bringing
mm,
in kind of a person who can work with a community and captures a lot of off-chain attestations about, if there was
mm,
a new water filtration system built in your community, how is that going? Are you using it? Is it cleaning your water? And you can make some basic attestations. And then the team ends up bringing it on chain, but the user is not interacting with the blockchain, right? So again,
mm.
it's all just about trade-offs here. So I think it
Yeah,
really depends on who are you trying to have part of your community, and if a big part of their experience just cannot be on chain as of today, then yes, that
yeah.
sounds like a very worthy problem to try to chip away at.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing. That's really meaningful, actually, perspectives. Like starting from again the mutuality of the exchange of value need not necessarily be mutual, right? Like that, I thought was very powerful because I'm also I lean towards being altruistic, and I do believe there is benefit in giving. So yeah, I totally am aligned with you on that. And then when it comes to that um, identification, attestation of labor, very, very ecosystem culture specific. I hear you about the degens wanting to having a certain type of culture, subculture, versus being more inclusive when it comes to onboarding people who aren't familiar to blockchain. I feel like when it comes to some kind of off-chain to on-chain attestation. The experiments the project you mentioned, Impact Garden and Nature, I've looked them up, haven't heard of them, but it brought to mind when you mentioned them this protocol called Unlocked and POAP,
Mm-hmm.
Unlocked protocol and POAP.xyz or something. Like they
Hmm.
actually help attest whether you met or attended or participated in a Web3 event, and then they enable that to be integrated with reputation systems on chain. I thought that was very interesting, considering we're in the age of AI where everything's deep fake now. I feel like yes, trust and verify, and I feel like off-chain interactions are becoming increasingly more valuable. I don't know what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess I always have a number of tensions around like these questions of bringing together things like attestations and just like general human interaction. I mean, for me, whether we're talking about governance or what is the role of technology,
Yeah,
for me, all of these things are to help humans human better. It's not about the tech itself or the governance system itself, or it's
yeah,
about humans and the collectives that we form.
yeah.
Um, so I don't know. In instances where that goes well, I think it's great, right? If you can create tech that is truly pro-social, if you can design a governance system where people feel they just feel good at the end of the interactions, right? And those are, I think, very nice outcomes, which usually, like, if you ask most gov leads or governance leads in the space of like, what are the KPIs that you're held to? The warm and fuzzies of your community is not necessarily
Yeah,
on that list because it's not exactly a quantitative metric.
yeah,
But nonetheless, I think that at least in my mind, these things are fundamentally about enhancing the human experience and improving
mm,
it. Um, and I don't know, I get scared of attestation systems because it really
oh,
depends on the
yeah,
policy of what you attest to, right? Because
mm,
there's the element of kind of the policy constraints of what can I attest to, right? If I think you looked at me in a weird way, can I go attest that you're a mean person for looking at me a weird way, right? Like then it starts getting
mm,
real choppy if you start trying to ding people for negative attestations.
yeah,
So generally, if we're talking attestation systems, I think we should only be attesting positive behavior. We should only be attesting to the things we want to encourage more of, not saying like, oh, Eugene yelled at me and so he's a mean guy, and so like I'm going to attest to him being a mean guy, right? Because like these reputation systems, especially like they're on chain, they follow you around for life potentially, and I don't think we should take that lightly. And on the flip side of it, there is the importance of trying to utilize this tech to get to do more than what we're able to do without it. I was recently having a conversation. We're actually launching our own podcast. My co-host, my colleague at the Scroll Foundation, Jamila, and I, we're launching a podcast called Governance Futures, Exploring the Future of Governance. And we were talking to the Liquefaction research group, which is out of Cornell under Ari Jules's lab there. And, their whole system of encumbered what pretty much you can like create wallets to share private keys, right? Where if you get a soulbound token, you can like rent that soulbound token out to me for a little bit of time. Or right now they have this experiment. I think it's Take My Ape. Forgetting if it's .io, xyz.com, but like, look up Take My Ape. I hope there's only one direction that sends you. But it's all about like they have a Bored Ape and you can effectively rent the Bored Ape for 15 minutes. But for those 15 minutes, you are a full owner of a Bored Ape. You could have access to the private community. You could go to a private Bored Ape event, whatever it is, you fully have access to that. So I also think we don't know, given how new Web3 is. I know for those who've been in the space, it's like, oh, each year is like a decade in Web3 and whatever, but we're still a baby as far as new technology goes. And like, someone gave me a lecture on liquefaction earlier this year and I was like, how do you not know about this and whatever? And I was like, now that I know about it, I feel the same way to other people, but like we all have so many blind spots. So that's where I'm less techno optimistic. And like, I believe we do need a little more caution and care with how we experiment, right? If we're a bunch of privileged people who don't have much to lose at the end of the day or in whatever experiment we're running, go have fun, right? Like there's no real lost potential there. If a thing breaks and we actually make it harder for someone to like get a job or feed their kids or just like live life regularly, that's not okay in my opinion. And so like finding those boundaries of where we experiment with new attestation and reputation systems, I think it's a tricky balance that doesn't always get the care that it deserves.
Yeah, no, I resonate with you on this because I come from a law background. So when it comes to like the subjectivity of rules and self-governance, I mean, who's to say more correct than the other? I mean, more right than the other, really. And when it comes to then it comes to the question of our existing systems, right, that uphold the rule of law and uphold stability in society, like is there a way to even create a hybrid system? I don't know. It's an open experiment, and jury's out because the days are still really early. That concept about borrowing Web3 identities, I thought that was very interesting. I immediately thought 15 minutes. What can I do with 15 minutes of someone's identity? Maybe like maybe not a party, but perhaps a flash loan or something. Who knows? Like, but it's fascinating to see how this space continues to evolve, especially in the DID space, right? And when it comes to another governance experiment that caught my eye recently was the votable supply adjustment proposal on Scroll. When we're thinking about adjusting for concentration of voting power. It's about rebalancing power in DAO voting. I heard you when I was reading. It was saying like, okay, you're delegating 1.5 million Scroll to in the treasury to 46 active delegates to widen participation. So how you had a big hand in this, Eugene. So what does this proposal tell us about what delegate systems are breaking down? Do you think this kind of buffer could become a new best practice for DAOs facing quorum fragility?
So a couple of things. So to clarify, what you're alluding to is where it started. So I had proposed I think it was a total 1.5 million SCR distribution. I guess just some quick numbers for contextualizing. We have a 1 billion total total amount of tokens issued as part of the contract. Most of that is still locked and not vested in various ways. And the current votable supply is, let's call it 6 million roughly, and our quorum is 2.1 million. And so the fundamental problem, because this is a thing that came up in the community as well, and I hoped it would solve two problems, but the main
Yep.
problem that it was meant to solve was avoiding us not clearing quorum. Like that was the primary problem to solve.
Yeah.
Me being me, the other thing I wanted to put in there was a rebalancing of power. As you can imagine, the bigger delegates did not like that, which might not be the fair way to put it. That is how I emotionally took it, but I don't know that it's a fair way to put it. Right? The argument that was given to me and presented is that, hey, if I'm a top 10 delegate, your token holders wanted me to be a top 10 delegate. So who are you to override the interest of your token holders and rebalance power in a way that they personally did not choose to do, right? Because at the end of the day, delegates, right, we moved away from direct democracy of everyone vote for everything to representative democracy of we elect
Yeah.
people who then go vote for everything. This is my personal opinion. This is not as like my
Yeah.
professional role of scroll gov lead. I think that's a weak argument, right? Because like taking scroll specifically, 6 million, right? Our current circulating supply is just under 200 million, right? That is a tiny percentage of actual token holders. So to pretend that, oh, like I'm the number 3 token holder, that means like you have to respect your token holders' interests. I'm like, well, I actually don't know what most of my token holders want because like 95% of them are not in governance, right? Which is a whole separate challenge that as of today, people in an ecosystem, especially whales or those with massive bags, they fundamentally have to make the choice of, am I going to go earn money on my money, or am I going to park my money in governance and be part of deciding the future of the protocol, right? And governance is work, right? For anyone who's like, what's a governance? What are governance decisions? If you and a large group of friends have tried to decide where to go out for dinner and that was a really annoying experience, you know what it's like to be part of governance, right? It's kind of like getting to consensus or to a good enough decision that no one is like, revolting against you and like forking out. Though I guess like DAOs relative to other systems, at least you can always like exit is always an option. You could always fork the code, yada, yada. But I don't know, a good governance system should not have like a ton of your people rage quitting. Though I guess that too is too general of a statement, and I'm sure you could find counter arguments to that. But nonetheless, I realize I'm starting to wander off, so I'll pause there and kind of let you bring us back conversationally.
Oh no, not at all. It's an open space, so yeah, feel free to express your thoughts, and I appreciate what you share, your personal views about how we view delegation of voting power. I mean that is actually a very very thorny topic that is persistent across many DAOs, if not all DAOs.
Yeah.
And it's just how do you, yeah, it is a mindset shift really that to educate how do you actually get to have meaningful participative governance, especially when you're not really representing most of your token holders anyway. Yeah. I think
And there's the
that's
other
where the
element, if I could
conversation needs
just
to
jump in
happen.
there, right?
Yeah.
As of today, if we take the representative democracy analogy,
Yeah.
that is the equivalent. The current version of delegated governance is the equivalent of if the mayor of my city was the mayor of like 20 other cities, right? Because most
Yeah.
delegates are delegates in a ton of ecosystems. And some
Yeah.
argue that, like, hey, well, I go learn from Optimism and ZK Sync and Arbitrum and all these other places, and I bring that back to Scroll. But again, right, Web3, we always talk about incentives. Well, what's the incentive, right? If you're doing that, chances are you're professionalizing your operations, you're bringing on other people, you're selling more services, and hopefully you're a good actor in providing value with your services. But you could just have the mentality of like, I want to be a big 4 professional delegate. I just want to be the one that everyone always goes to like go do stuff. And I don't know that that is, like recreating the big 4 consulting firms or something like that on Web3 in the form of delegates. I don't know that that's where we should be heading. And I also I don't know that the current form of delegated governance is the actual optimal version of what we want. And I don't have a here's the version that I think most DAOs are going to do yet. That's part of why we're going to be doing our podcast, is to explore the different flavors of what we see as the future trends coming together. But
Yeah.
for us, we're already starting to shift from global voting for all delegates to a council model with optimistic governance. So how can we
Yeah.
actually get most of the work done through specific streams of activity? So through 3, 5, 7-person councils, and then the delegates can
Mm,
veto their decisions, right? So there's the
mm,
element of like the design of the system. Is this actually an optimal design and we need to tweak the parameters? Or are we just fundamentally in a non-ideal design and getting
mm,
lost in tweaking parameters when we should be redesigning the system, right? So to come back to, I
yeah.
realized the previous question that I didn't fully finish answering. So with where
Mm,
we ended up with our version of the votable supply adjustment was a super, like, it's hard to get upset about this kind of option with like,
oh,
okay, I guess we're just going to put 500,000 SCR in a wallet that the foundation manages and we just auto abstain, right? So we do not vote, we
mm,
do not participate in the decision. It's effectively the same as bringing down the quorum without bringing down the quorum, right? And like
oh,
bringing down
yeah.
the quorum technically opens a bit of a security risk. So just everyone's a little more comfortable with like, let's not drop the number, but we can like create this artificial buffer to get closer to it if our 3 biggest delegates just have life happen and they can't vote in a cycle. The system
Yeah.
shouldn't stop. So like that was the main thing we
Mm,
wanted to solve. But I thought it
yeah.
was fascinating to see how many people were really about the let's redistribute power versus how many people were like, guys, that's not what we're here to do. Like, that's the token holders' wishes. It's like the same logic I hear from like overly enthusiastic capitalists who pretend of like, oh, well, I'm just representing shareholder interests, as if like a shareholder has a gun to their head asking them to do what they're doing, right? So like, I get it, but those, yeah, I don't always agree with the logic heading into those decisions. But wearing my
Yeah.
hat of my role, my job is not to make my opinion happen. My job is to solve the core problems to make sure we can move forward. So in this
Yeah.
instance, I was comfortable arguing that, like, I hear you. I want to have the power redistribution conversation. Having it now is just going to kill this thing that we need. So let's just park that. Let's solve the problem at hand, and then we'll come back to
Yeah.
power redistribution at another time.
Yeah. No, it's a great stopgap solution, abstaining, because it does also raise interesting thoughts about conflicts of interest, right? Like, so I wonder whether that kills two birds with one stone at the same time, because as a foundation, you're also actively designing systems of governance for the community to rally around and vote on. So that gets them involved actively in participating in governance in some way. And through the councils that offer these kind of uh, proposals to vote on. For example, the Ecosystem Growth Council, you mentioned the 7-body council to oversee 2 million scroll. I think that was very interesting. So we could talk a little bit more about that. But I'm curious to know, do you think that also solves that conflict of interest? The foundation abstains, but we enact the rules for you to vote. Yeah.
Um, Yeah, I guess I would want to double click on the specific nature of that conflict of interest to better answer whether or not I feel like it's solving it. But
Yeah.
I can confidently say that it was the thing that made sure that we will consistently pass quorum
Mm,
while upsetting the least amount of people. And I think that's a reasonable parallel for democratic decision making. You don't always go for the best thing. You go for the thing that is most palatable to people that actually solves the problem.
mm,
Especially because for us at Scroll, between the foundation and the DAO, we are very much trying to create a culture of participatory co-design. I
mm,
will be the first to say that I don't think we are innovating on the actual governance architecture so far. We're kind of following models that work
mm,
slightly better in certain ecosystems. Something like
yeah.
optimistic governance in councils. I think that's been tried since like 2018, 2019 in smaller examples. I think Synthetics was
Mm,
the first one to do that, if I'm remembering correctly, in Web3. And obviously that's happened outside. But for us, the thing that feels different about Scroll DAO, or the thing that we tried that I haven't seen many DAOs, or if any do, is really instantiate this very specific culture of co-design and try to make like deliberation, working with other people, fundamentally be part of how we run things. So we have these co-creation cycles, and we're actually about to do our third one soon, specifically on the org design of the DAO. So to have the DAO design what the DAO should look like, which should be a fun exercise, by kind of assessing what work is being done, what work should be done, what are the right containers to bring together that work most effectively, and then what KPIs and metrics should the teams doing that work do. And by doing that, we've effectively just designed our future councils. So like that's the process we're about to run through in mid to late July.
Okay, I wish you all the best with that. And it's interesting because it mirrors what I don't know what it mirrors per se, but what larger organizations and what to do with structured working groups. It's with a veto window, delegate oversight baked in. Like, are you seeing this more as a holocratic structure, or more of a circles-based, very sociocratic type of org structure? I think some people call holocratic structures teal. Yeah, curious to know your thoughts. Yeah.
No, I'm smiling to this just because I've gotten lost in so many conversations. In like 2 hours, and you're like, "Oh, we're just using sociocratic in a different way, and we didn't realize that." So the goal, ultimately, as I see it, right? I think one of the biggest failures of DAOs today is that we're failing on all three letters for the most part. We're not that decentralized, we're not that autonomous, and we're not really organizations, because organizations can actually get things done. And most DAOs don't get that much done, or if they do, a lot of the time it's not coherently aligned with the strategy of the rest of the ecosystem. That is a very broad way to categorize DAOs. Like, I love DAOs. I'm here working on this full time. I see them as a very important part of the future of organizations, but I don't think we're accomplishing any of that at the moment. And so I think a very kind of the low hanging fruit is the O part, right? I'm not saying recreate a 40 tier corporate structure on a blockchain. That would be silly. We can like unpack some of the specific terms of sociocracy versus holacracy, and the circle structures versus the teal structures versus this or that. For me, I guess it's like, what is the goal here, right? In my mind, the goal of this organization is to get stuff done. The stuff we need to get done is grow the ecosystem and make it sustainable in the long term. And we need to do that in a way that is transparent and accountable while actually getting things done. And I think this is sometimes a hot take, though I feel like these days not as much. But I think that there's this allure towards the word of decentralization, as if like it's this thing that exists in the wild, and like we just have to go catch a decentralization and like make it flourish on our side. And like, what are we actually talking about most of the time when we get into decentralization, right? And like, if we're taking that logic, like, why not full distribution? Like, why not have a full distributed system where every node is connected to every other node? And right, like, there's reasons we don't do stuff like that all the time. And it's about being hyper intentional with what are the features of decentralization, and which ones are we not willing to sacrifice, right? Like, maybe transparency and accountability. Those feel like non-negotiables. If we're not caring about transparency and accountability, just go work at a corporation or a Web2 startup. And so like, we're inherently open source. I feel like we're a pocket of the industry is trying to be more open, right? Even with something like when FTX happened, I feel like the biggest narrative that we missed as an industry is degens found this, right? The regulators didn't find this. A lawyer didn't find this. Like, I know some of the guys who were doing the research at the time, and they like put a blog post of like, I think I found something fishy, because all of this is open and transparent. It's just not legible. And like, we're getting better at the systems of making sense of it. But like, that is so powerful. Like, Enron didn't get caught by some random degen on the internet. WorldCom didn't get caught by some, right? So like, that to me is so powerful. And so even if we just like recreate the corporate world, but with actual accountability and transparency, like, that is already a huge upgrade for society. I think that would kind of miss further potential upgrades, but like, that seems like, for me personally, a non-negotiable bare minimum adjustment is, if we do a corporate, or if we do a regular old fashioned startup, but we
Mm,
make it actually accountable to a broader community, I'm okay with that being the first step of being, a kind of a Web3 decentralized org, right? We can get lost in a
mm.
lot of discussions of, is that really Web3? Like, throw in a multi-sig. Is it Web3 enough for you yet? And so, like, we can get like lost in like some of the semantics here. But
Yeah.
that's the thing to me that's most important. So, am I a fan of hierarchy? No. Am I a fan of egos and encouraging people to like be, big men or women or they thems in like their environment and just like domineer over others? No, that's stupid, right? Like, we should all be doing things because we want to achieve more together than we can accomplish alone. And yeah, I'm
Mm,
like, a lot of this is also like very personal views, but like for me, that's
yeah.
why I'm doing this. And like, that's the part where if it looks like we have a little bit of hierarchy, I don't care. That's
Mm.
not the primary objective for me. The first primary objective is actually get things done and be fully transparent and accountable to the community.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you on this, Eugene. I also am aligned with the values of transparency and accountability and integrity. It's very much something that Katashe stands by. And when we do business here in Asia, it's it's interesting to see how when you shared the examples about what does decentralization mean actually? Because it is a thing to say just decentralize everything, and then what is that Ethiopian world like? And taking a, a step back, when in my lived experience, running a nonprofit out here in Asia, as a blockchain association on a board, it is difficult to actually get things done. Agree. We have very much a, a crypto native first ethos, but trying to do it in a Web two, like a traditional like corporate structure. However, this year we tried a different experiment. We tried to decentralize our way of making decisions. So we
Mm.
launched working groups. Nothing new out of the ordinary, but it decentralized the board's voting power somewhat, and it actually had a positive effect in getting more members actively involved in launching industry initiatives. People were more engaged, and I think that's the effectiveness, right, of what proper decentralization looks like. People getting involved, people voting, people actually committing their time and resources to a cause they care about. And it's great to see that your values are aligned with what you want to do in this field of work and governance. And it's encouraging to see. It's also great to see how we can also relate across different time zones, different parts of the world.
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
I honestly feel ridiculously privileged to like get to work on governance in the way that I'm currently able to, and yeah, just to like get to work on the stuff that you find most interesting is just such a rarity and luxury, and I'm very appreciative of that. And like as you were mentioning, the community that you're working within, there are also, this is where it's so important to just like know your community and design for the community or for the goal that you have, because there are times when you want consensus based decision making, right? And it's
Yeah.
intentionally slow, and like, bureaucracy should not inherently be a bad word. Bureaucracy is just meant to slow things down to make sure things are done right. Right? The
Mm,
stereotype of bureaucracy is very bad. Right? I was born in the former Soviet Union, where I feel like it's like the never-ending, just get sent to another department kind of joke of dealing with the government. Right? So like,
mm,
bad bureaucracy is bad, but if it fits the culture of like, you really want to be inclusive, you're okay being a small community, great, you can do consensus based decision making and like zero hierarchy. If you want to actually
mm,
have thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions of people involved in what you do, you're probably
mm,
going to need to add more structure, and it might end up looking a little more uh even if it's not hierarchical, you're going to need people to step up and lead at different times. And I think that's again where like our natural tendency to make things, it's either this or that, as opposed to looking at the spectrum in between, is just not always helpful. And that really relates to what we're saying with decentralization. most things aren't fully centralized or fully decentralized. It's
Yeah.
understanding the trade-offs with each step you take in that direction, or in either direction rather.
Yeah, yeah, agree with this, and I'm trying to see like one other experiment we're running is having a community treasury. So
Mm,
that was something we wanted to try and get more members rallied around within Access, our association. We thought like, okay, since we're the first in a nonprofit to actually have strategic Bitcoin reserves even before MicroStrategy had such a strategy. We're thinking like, how do we actually get community members to actively contribute? And that actually
mm,
gave brought up the Scrolls local nodes program, which I read about.
mm,
It's not just a technical initiative; it's a social one. The folks are running local nodes. They're expected to stay active in governance, provide feedback, really show up. In some ways, I feel like they seem like they're becoming power users of the protocol. People who have skin in the game, in the protocol itself, and a stake in its evolution. Do you think that there is a natural overlap between node contributors, node operators, stakers, and high
mm,
quality governance participants? Curious to know your thoughts on this.
mm. Yeah, so a few things there. One, I realized local node was not the best nomenclature. It throws people off a bunch of the time. So it does not have to do with literal node operators or anything like that. It's more of like a geographic node of just, it's the community in
Ah,
Singapore, the community in Kuala Lumpur, the community in a specific part of the world. Um,
got it.
so yeah, that's kind of one aspect of it. And the way we're thinking about local nodes is, like Scroll, like we don't have a treasury of a Uniswap, of an Arbitrum, of an Optimism. Like we have to be a little more small and scrappy and a little more intentional with our first actions.
Mm,
So we kind of set certain priority regions, really informed by where labs is focused and how do we both add to what they're doing as well as build kind of very closely to that, and to add intentional experimentation beyond what labs has the ability to focus on. Right. So instead of just like taking bets in different directions and seeing what happens, how do we keep adding more and more bets roughly in one broad direction to maximize our chance of hopefully achieving our goal of becoming a sustainable growing network. So
mm,
um we passed our first three local nodes, and the way we're structuring it is capping 3-month initial windows, capping an initial budget, and trying to work with the
mm,
teams to set very clear KPIs that the ultimate goals are to surface builders and founders. Right, Scroll is
mm,
new. We don't have a first mover advantage. Growth is kind of everything in the first few years of a project, for
yeah,
us especially. So right now, every part of the ecosystem needs to be hyper oriented towards how do we grow? What does that mean in terms of like, how do we find new high quality applications? How do we
mm,
solve problems that people are actually dealing with so that we can have users of the apps that get built? Right. So
right.
that is kind of the North Star that we're trying to rally all the entities around. And so from that perspective, the local nodes have KPIs of, how many people are you sending to the Scroll Open, the next 6 week kind of, I don't want, it's not just a hackathon. It's much more of like a guided and staged building experience. But
Mm.
I don't have a convenient one word term for that yet.
It's
But
okay.
like how many
It's okay.
people go into Scroll Open? How many people win a prize at the end of it? How many people actually get invited to go to our campus in Malaysia and, potentially even get a grant from us in the end or something to that effect? So
Mm,
seeing how you add to this kind of pipeline is the initial set of KPIs. But we also have our delegate training program that's going to be
mm,
launching sometime in July into August, and so we're trying to create different pathways for meaningful contribution. Right? If you're a builder,
mm,
designer, or business person who wants to like go do a startup, great. Like help us go directly grow the network. If that's not your jam, come hang out in
mm,
governance land, right? Like we're going to try to make this as a place where and especially with the co-creation cycles, those are
mm,
not token weighted, right? So if you come in and you have 0 tokens and you're sat in a virtual room right next to the biggest whale in the ecosystem, your voices are equal in the design of the ideas that emerge in that process. Once we vote
mm,
on things that come from that, yes, they're still token weighted, but that doesn't mean that your ideas won't get surfaced. Whereas a complaint that we hear
Mm.
from a lot of delegates in other ecosystems is like, hey, if I'm not friends with one of the top 10, my ideas are just never going to get really heard or never get true airtime. So in that sense, we
Mm.
wanted to kind of design it to level the idea playing field, even if we are sticking with token weighted voting as kind of the actual way that governance instantiates decisions. Yeah, so I'll stop there because I feel like I took a few steps and forgot where I started. It's
No,
getting late.
no, it was on track. Don't worry about it. Yeah, no, it's just interesting to hear you explain it because yeah, the nomenclature. I got lost a little bit there. But okay, so you're optimizing for DApp founders to build on-chain through this localization of nodes programs. Okay, that's very interesting. I've been lurking in this growth forum, to be honest. I've not made a single post. Actually, it is a little bit intimidating because I'm new to the ecosystem. Yeah, like literally, you're the first scroll representative I actually met when
Mm.
we first connected at DEF CON. And I appreciated the gesture to come hang and in the governance forums and events. Yeah, so I've been lurking. Shout out to all
Feel
the
free to
other
say
scroll
hi. It's not as scary
governance
as it looks.
folks out there. Yeah. And would be curious to see how I can participate in the delegate program. That's actually very interesting. If it's not too late.
Yeah.
Ooh.
I will I need to find the link for it, or there's a chance it's open somewhere in my sea of browsers. But there is a delegate training interest form.
Oh.
Let me see if I can quickly find that. But basically through this Friday, people can still apply to become
Mm.
to join in on this. Yeah, here's the link.
Oh wow.
Um
Today's the last day.
oh yeah, you're in the future. So yes, last day for you.
Oh.
One more day if you're still in the past of being in the States or where it's Thursday still. But yes, so by end of day Friday. Nope, sorry, that sent you the what was there and not the link. And I can drop this
Yeah.
in Telegram or email later, but I dropped it here
Yeah.
in chat. Um,
Oh.
so yeah, we have this training program. It was initially designed a little more to serve folks who are already delegates and kind of want to learn more and go deeper into both scroll specifically, but right the other side of it is there aren't clear ways of advancing your career as a delegate, right? Like there's
Mm.
no you join as an analyst and you level up to an associate and then you get promoted to a
Yeah.
VP at some point. And again, we're not trying to mimic corporate structures, but and this is not meant to throw shade at anyone, but I know a handful of delegates who started doing delegation in uni through some of these university delegation programs and
Mm.
then flip that into being full-time delegates after uni. And like I
Ah.
just can't help the thought of like all you know is being a delegate, like you've never had a job. And so but again, like that's not necessarily a problem in certain
Yeah.
instances, but like if thinking back to myself at 22, 23 versus where I am now, all of my jobs helped me learn a lot as well as my independent learning journeys. But, that really
Mm.
added to my knowledge and ability. In my opinion, I can contribute much more now than I could then. Um, and like I know plenty of young folks right out of college who are smarter than I am, and that's not a problem. But nonetheless, it's just more of wherever you're at, how do you get to the next level? And so, like, I don't feel like there are good structured learning journeys yet for governance.
Mm.
So, part of the inspiration of this was we've seen a few ecosystems try, like, hey, you're new, come go through this program and become a delegate, and we'll like give you some money and some delegation. And the conversion is actually really bad in those, from what we've heard.
Mm.
Um, that it's just like if you care enough about governance to go do governance, you're probably doing governance. And like for those for whom it's unapproachable, it's still going to be
Mm.
unapproachable after an 8-week course. So like we didn't want to
Mm.
pretend that that was going to solve like the onboarding new people into governance problem. So it seemed more reasonable to develop a curriculum oriented around existing delegates or people who have some kind of baseline of governance knowledge, and more
Yeah.
think of it as like a level up journey. And my hope is that we're going to keep both within the DAO, but also start partnering with external institutions to just like create this open source series of learning opportunities. Like I hope that a year or two from now, there's
Mm,
effectively like the equivalent of an open source college degree that you can get on like WTF is governance all the way through of like, I can go build your system for you. And
mm,
like, that would be super cool if there were enough recorded courses and materials that like people can actually guide a journey there. Right
yeah.
now, it's still a lot of like, go figure it out on your own. And I do think governance
Mm,
is one of those things that like you do need to go try it. Like when I've heard people get like martial arts degrees or like a black belt in karate online, it's like that's not real. Like that's one of those things
mm,
like you got to go do it with another person for it to be real. And like governance is definitely
mm,
like that. So you do just need to throw yourself in it and feel the messiness of it. But there are a
mm.
lot of ideas and concepts that you can easily get along the way and feel more confident and comfortable jumping into it. So yeah, that might have been a longer answer than
Yeah.
needed, but that's
No,
what
no, no,
got us
no.
towards that program.
No, no, thanks for sharing it. It's very interesting to see how this space is evolving, right? It when we think decentralized governance, yeah, it's so new. It's a field where probably didn't exist like I don't know 10 years ago or something. Or at least it's very very early stages with the first DAO with Ethereum. And the part about how uni students become this transition into full-time delegates, that I thought was very interesting, very very unique path, I would say, but a path nonetheless. And um, everyone learns by doing because the space is still so early. And it brought to mind for me the landscape of TradFi and DeFi and how we're trying to wrangle around what is proper compliance, what is in the letter of the law, what is proper risk management. We were having these discussions in our DeFi working groups, and it's interesting to see how lawyers like in the financial markets lawyers trying to grapple with new terms and taxonomies right around creating new open financial systems, for example. And I think the only way is to really, yeah, just experience by doing and getting immersed in the systems in itself, because that's what's shaping the future, really. That's just me being very bullish on the tech. But yes, I think we're almost at time, I think. So I was going to say, how people can contribute to scroll
Mm.
governance or to scroll's ecosystem meaningfully. What's one small step people can take? I know you shared me the link for the Delegate program, so I'm going to share that. It at least provides some kind of certification. Do you have a certification of some sort, or like at the end of the course, or
We're not going to
yeah,
officially.
yeah,
We're at least to my knowledge, there's no discussion yet of like a formal certificate yet. I think
yeah,
like 8 weeks is not enough to have any kind of certificate. You know, going
yeah,
back to the attestation conversation where we started, we might just
yeah.
attest that you finished it. But again, folks who finish to the instructor's level of satisfaction might get a 5K SCR delegation at the end of it. So we also want to
Mm,
like give people skin in the game to be like, hey, well, now you actually can be a delegate and you have reasonable voting power. Of course, you're not going to be like top 10, top 50 delegate, but like you'll be in the top 100. And so, you know, get people to start being more active. And that's one way. But again, we're keeping that program pretty small.
mm,
Um, it's going to be, I think, 20 to start, but my hope is that it goes well and we'll do more versions in the future. But in terms of how to get involved, I mean, I feel like we're just getting started. You know, the approach that we took was intentionally slow to start. And I feel like we're
mm.
really starting to ramp up our activities and focus. So, you know, check out our forum.scroll.io. I think that's probably a good entry point. It might seem like a lot. That is totally fine.
Yeah.
Read around. I'm a pretty easy person to find. I'm, you know, pretty public on Twitter and things. I try not to post too much. I don't enjoy being on social media, but I do make myself public enough that people can find me. So like, always feel free to reach out to me. You know, especially if you're feeling intimidated by coming to Scroll and you want to be in Scroll, I would love to hear from you, because I want to, like, that's a thing for me that we need to be more intentional about. And I don't
Mm.
talk to enough people who feel that way, because the people who I talk to have made it past that feeling and probably don't remember what that feeling was like. So, like, I want to learn more and fill in my own blind spots there. And, to one small thing that you mentioned, with like decentralized governance, at least for Web3 being, like the DAO was almost 10 years ago. Decentralized governance as a thing, I would argue, is as old as humanity, right? Like co-ops,
Mm.
farming collectives, like all these things are versions of decentralized governance. And like,
Yeah.
in my mind, finding the right version of your people and being part of that and getting stuff done, whatever the stuff you like doing with your people, is just so fundamentally human, right? Some of us like degenning and doing money DeFi things. Some of us just want vibes and hangout and memes. Some of us just want to go be governance nerds, and all kinds of flavors in between. And so, like, where I think governance is really beautiful and can be missed some of the time is that, like, it is meant to fundamentally be pro-social, pro-human. And so,
Mm.
like, don't feel bad shopping around. Like, you might check out our vibe and be like, this does not resonate with me at all. I want to go to a hyper clean, governance minimal environment that's DeFi oriented. Like, great, if that's your thing, like, go do it. You should be excited about your ecosystem. So I think it's
Mm.
just like a go explore. And at the end of the day, like, no one, I mean, maybe now there are people getting blockchain degrees or whatever, but like, especially for anyone who's been around from not just the last year or so, all of us made up our journey here. None of us planned to end up like, I never thought I'd be a head of governance at a Web3 foundation. None of those words were real when I was graduating college, right? Like, I was in college
Yeah.
when Bitcoin came out. So,
Mm.
to date myself a little bit, right? So and I had no clue that Bitcoin was coming out because I wasn't that big of a, like, following all the tech cutting edge. So, it's just one of those, like, pursue your passions, find what's interested, and don't feel bad just like putting yourself out there a little bit. Like any ecosystem or any environment, you're not always going to find your people right away. It might feel like a journey and you might be lonely during
Mm.
it, but like, they're out there. Don't lose faith, keep looking. And if Scroll feels like a place you like hanging out, please do feel free to reach out to me.
Yay, thanks for sharing, Eugene. That's very encouraging because I myself have been trying to find a community here in Asia as well, and that's uh, geeking out to governance. So I didn't find one, so I created one.
That's
Hence,
awesome.
governance. Yeah, hence governance growth was born. Again, we're all just finding and finding our own learning pathways, and I feel like this has to be private sector led naturally. All the learning pathways, certifications, attestations, and all that. Like I feel like even within the DeFi world, that's what it's coming to. Like to reskill lawyers, to reskill compliance professionals. Like everyone's just relearning and learning, unlearning. And it's great that Scroll's taking the initiative to do this, right? When it comes to market education on decentralized governance. So I'm gonna share this live stream, do some post edits with it. Of course, after the show, I just realized that I literally turned on my camera and I was putting on my makeup prior to the show. So like, if anyone wants to see the behind the scenes of what it's like to set up a podcast, yes, feel free to gawk. But anyway, thank
Yeah,
you so
it's your
much,
version of, what
Eugene.
are those videos? The get ready with me or whatever they
I
are. You could
know,
do your
right?
podcast version of that. Yeah.
Exactly. But yes, thank you so much for your time, Eugene. I know it's late over there, but let's definitely keep in touch,
For
and
sure.
I'll try to like start interacting a little bit before we stop lurking. Yes. Again, I'll share these links with you. I think the links are up on, as of this point in time, 41 people are watching. It's going to be on YouTube, X, and LinkedIn on my
Nice.
social channels. So hope the word for governance, good governance, gets out, best in class governance, and which ecosystems to look for. Yes, i.e. Scroll. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is a great conversation. And yeah, I look forward to staying in touch and seeing how else we can geek out on governance together.
Yes, for sure. Okay, I'm signing off from Singapore. And